What's going on, everyone? Mitesh here, and you know what? Smartphones are hard to make. I mean, even giants in the mobile space like Google have had a hard time breaking into the market with their Pixel phones. So it was really surprising to hear TCL, who's much better known for making TVs, announcing 3 new smartphones at the beginning of this year. But they did it, and they're attacking the smartphone market the same way they did the TV market by trying to provide a great value smartphone instead of going all out and giving you something that can compete with the iPhones and Galaxy S20s of the world, because let's face it, that's really hard to do. And today I have for you guys my full review of their flagship phone, the 10 Pro, which comes in at just $450. So the real question is, did they defy the odds and create a great smartphone on their first try? Let's talk about it. Alright, so there are 5 main topics I want to cover in this review. I want to talk about the displays, the camera, performance, software, and battery life. Together, I think these 5 components can make a fantastic smartphone, but more importantly, for budget phones like this one, it can show you the trade-offs that you're making to hit that price point and can really help you narrow down who this phone is for. So let's start off by talking about the display, and at this price point you generally expect to get an okay LCD panel with lackluster colors that is barely bright enough to see outside. But that's not the case here. Since TCL is a TV manufacturer, they have a lot of experience making great screens, and the 10 Pro comes with a 6.4-inch 1080p AMOLED display that supports HDR10. So it's got great colors and great brightness. So yeah, it's a pretty good screen. But of course it's not perfect. It's only a 60 Hz display. It's got a U-shaped notch, which I know personally I don't have a problem with, but some of you out there will. And out of the box, I really do feel like the colors are a little bit oversaturated, but it's all minor problems. The biggest problem this display has is the curved edges. This is my first smartphone with curved edges, and I frankly hate them. I've never had so many accidental touches when I'm trying to use a phone, and I thought I would get used to it over time. I thought, just a couple days with it, I would get used to it, but I have not. I've had it for a month, and I have not gone a single day without having an accidental mistouch with this display. So definitely, curved displays, I think, is just a downside of this display. The curved display also causes like the colors to shift off axis, and you get some weird light reflections on the edges if you're looking at it, and there's a light to your left or right. So it's really annoying. And in 2020, we see a lot of companies moving away from curved displays like Samsung. They've started making the curves a little bit less sharp. So it's a little bit sad to see TCL deciding to go the route of having these large curves on their display when everybody else is going away from it. Now for the calibration of the display, the phone does come with an app from TCL to tune the display's color and white balance. It also helps you do things like convert SDR content to HDR and has a reading mode built in. I didn't particularly find the HDR conversion to be that great. It did tend, in my opinion, to just tend to make skin tones look a lot worse in most of the stuff that I watch, so I kept it off. But if you guys want to see what your videos look like in HDR, you can do that. It's also got the raw reading mode, which I actually found to be pretty useful. So what it does is it reduces all the blue light that's coming out of your display, or at least does a good job of removing most of it, and that helps you be able to focus on your display for longer. So if you're someone who likes to read books on your phone, this is absolutely great. If you're someone who spends most of your time on social media looking at pictures and stuff, I would definitely not use this mode for that at all. Now before we move on from the display, the one other thing that I want to mention here was speakers on this phone, or rather the singular speaker on the bottom of this phone. Look, it's 2020. This is not a sub $300 phone. It shouldn't have a single speaker. Like seriously, the viewing experience from this great screen is marred by having a single downward firing speaker that's really easy to cover up, and it does get decently loud, but it still sounds hollow and tinny at high volume. So I don't think that's a bad choice, but they did, on the prop side, give you a headphone jack, something that you really don't see in smartphones anymore, so that's kind of cool. I mean, I personally haven't used it that much, but it's cool that it's there. Alright, but let's move on from the displays to talking about the cameras on this phone. Now, I did a full review of the cameras already, so you guys can check that out up in the cards up here or in the description below. But let me sum it up for you here. So first of all, there are a lot of cameras on this phone. There are 4 of them on the back and 1 on the front. The front one, in my opinion, is the worst one. It lacks HDR, and unless you're in great light, it doesn't look good at all. It's also a lot narrower than most other smartphone cameras, so you're gonna have a hard time fitting a lot of people in the camera unless you can really stretch your arm far out, or if you have a selfie stick. Now as for the cameras on the back, the main camera sensor is a 64 megapixel sensor that takes 60 megapixel bin photos that look actually really good in good lighting. They're not what I would call realistic. They tend to be overly bright and have really punchy colors. So I think a lot of people will really like this, but they don't tend to be very realistic. In poor lighting though, the photos do tend to be very soft with the aggressive noise reduction, so that's not great. That's the same situation for the ultra wide camera, which is really nice to have, but it's the same thing. In good lighting, it can be really great, especially for outdoor shots. For indoor shots, I found that generally there wasn't enough light to make it look good. And also, it's a really hard time focusing on objects that are close by. So if you're trying to take a really wide shot of something that's in front of you, you're gonna have a hard time getting in focus unless it's pretty far away from you. So that's why I found it a little sad. Now the other two cameras on the phone I found a little bit less useful. There's a macro camera on here, which is actually pretty cool. It's definitely one of the best macro cameras that I've used so far, but I just don't see myself using it that much. And then there's a 2 megapixel ultra low light video camera, which it's just not worth mentioning. So overall for the cameras, I would say the cameras are pretty good for the price point, unless you're comparing it to something like the Pixel 3a, but then you're limited to just having a single camera, though it is admittedly a much better camera than what's on this phone. All right, next up, let's talk about one of the most important things to get right with a budget phone, and that is performance. These days, performance is a given on high-end flagship phones. There might be some small difference between how fast one phone launches an app versus another. Like you can compare the iPhone and the Galaxy Note 20, whatever, but honestly, it doesn't matter because most people will never notice the difference. It's not gonna affect their everyday lives. But with budget phones, you never know what you're gonna get, if you're gonna get a reasonable experience or something that's just awful. So in terms of specs here, we have the Snapdragon 675 along with 6 gigabytes of RAM. And I have to say, performance on this phone has just been amazing. I really did not expect a budget phone to perform this well, and it's really performed well. I'm not saying that there aren't any slowdowns. There are definitely slowdowns in places, but it's been really good. Now, I'm not saying it's going to keep up with flagship phones in terms of like app launches or fluid UI, but other than a few weak spots that I found while I was testing this phone, I really haven't found myself frustrated at all while using this phone. The phone can even handle split screen multitasking really well. Like, it's not the smoothest when opening up a second app, but it works, and you can just use both the apps really well, something that the iPhone currently can't do. And the 6 gigabytes of RAM definitely help. This is, I think, fantastic to see on a budget phone. I think 6 gigabytes of RAM should be mandatory now on the Android phones. Now there's one place that I found the performance to be a little annoying, and that was with the fingerprint reader. Initially, I thought this was just an in-display fingerprint reader. I thought, you know, those are just generally just slower than the more traditional capacitive ones. But after testing it a while, I realized that I could take my finger off the lock and it was still unlock after half a second. So the phone had registered my fingerprint. It was already unlocking. It just took a little bit longer to unlock than I thought was necessary. So yeah, that's been one of those few places that I noticed that's a little bit slower. And since it's the only way to unlock your phone without, you know, actually putting in a passcode or something, it's a little bit annoying. But yeah, overall, I really think that the average person will not notice that this phone is running a slower processor than the Galaxy Notes of the world or whatever like that. So yeah, performance-wise, this phone is surprisingly good. Now, performance is helped quite a bit by the software, which for a first attempt by TCL is really great. The phone has Android 10, of course, and the skin on top is very close to stock Android. Honestly, it's very much like a Samsung skin, and it's a good thing. Honestly, Samsung's been making pretty good skins nowadays, and it's been really good. There are a couple extra apps thrown in there, like Next Vision to control your tuning of your smart display, Smart Key app, which lets you control the little button on the left-hand side, which, by the way, way better than having a Bixby button because you can customize it completely. And it's also got an IR remote app for the IR Blastron that's on top of the device. And there's a few other specific apps, but I wouldn't call anything bloatware. Like, there's Facebook and Netflix installed in the phone by default, but honestly, I think most people will be pretty happy with that. And yeah, they've also added a couple of useful functions like a built-in screen recorder and then scrolling screenshots and things like that. But then they've also made some weird decisions like the volume pop-up covering the entire YouTube page when watching YouTube videos in portrait. Like, it's super annoying, and you can't dismiss it either. So when you turn up the volume while you're watching a video, it just takes up the entire space for like a good 3-4 seconds, and it's really annoying. And then the other thing is Smart Key. Right? I really like the fact that they have the Smart Key, but I don't love the location of it. It's the exact opposite side of the power button, so I found myself hitting it a little bit too much. So I pretty much disabled the single tap, but you still have the double tap and the long press, and I use it to turn on my flashlight all the time. It's really great. Also, the lock screen by default doesn't show you actual notifications. I found that really annoying. Like, it won't actually show you the notification, it just shows you a little symbol for it. So the cool thing is, though, it is available in the settings. You can change it back to how it works. I just kind of wish that they would have just left the Android default versus doing their own skin thing. But the fact that they give you the option to change it back, that's just still nice to have. So yeah, overall, software on this phone it's really not that bad at all. Like, I could easily see myself getting used to it over time. But the problem comes in when we talk about software updates. So first of all, mid-range and budget Android phones have never been great about getting the new version of Android. Like, whatever version of Android you got is most likely the version you're gonna be on forever with that phone. So getting a guarantee from TCL that you're gonna get at least Android 11 on this phone is good, but I can't help but feel at this point that it's just not enough anymore. This phone costs the same price as an iPhone SE with the same amount of storage, and that phone is going to get updates for at least 3 years, if not more. So guaranteeing just 1 year worth of updates, it's just not cutting it anymore. Or if you still want an Android device, you can get the Pixel 3a, which is guaranteed another 3 years of updates, and even though it came out last year, it's more likely to see Android 12 unlike this phone, which just sucks. And then finally, the last thing I wanted to cover in this review was the battery life and the miscellaneous stuff that I learned about this phone while using it. So battery life is actually a real highlight on this phone. It's a 4,500 milliamp hour battery, which paired with a low power Snapdragon 675 lets this phone run for an entire day easily. Like, you can easily get to the next day without charging your phone. I normally get around 6 to 8 hours of screen on time, and yeah, battery life is just not something that I'm worried about at all with this phone. They do include also a 18 watt fast charger in the box, so that's really nice. 18 watts is a little slow these days for Android devices, and it does take a while to charge the battery, but honestly, it doesn't really matter that much. And of course, it's also lacking wireless charging, but at this price point, not many phones have it, and it would even take even longer to charge your phone with that. All right, and then let's talk about some of the miscellaneous stuff. So first of all, this is a GSM only phone, but it's actually certified to use on Verizon. Now, how well it's gonna work, I don't know, since you can't use CDMA with it. So if you don't have good 4G coverage, I don't know what it's gonna be like, but I've been using it on T-Mobile and it works just fine with that, which actually, let me tell you one other thing about this. But you know, one thing that I don't think gets mentioned enough is how much slower mid-range smartphones are at connecting to your network than flagship phones. So I tested this phone against my Pixel 4 on Wi-Fi, and my Pixel pulled down 3 times the download speed and 2 times the upload speed on Wi-Fi. And on 4G, I was getting 2 times the download speed, although weirdly I got higher upload speeds on the TCL. I don't know. But honestly, both phones sucked on high upload speed, so I'm not really counting that one as a win for TCL. But yeah, just something you should know, that if you buy a cheaper Android phone, you do tend to get a worse modem. Just something that's there. And the other thing I want to mention was the back of this phone is glass. Oh, first of all, it's really, really well built. My phone is a glass sandwich like most other flagship smartphones are these days, and yeah, just built really well. The back of the phone is a matte texture, so it's nice in that it's it gets almost no fingerprints, although it is a very slippery phone because it doesn't actually have a camera bump. That's pretty cool. The flashes are raised just a little tiny bit, but because of the lack of camera bump, this phone does tend to slide around quite a bit if you leave it on a slanted surface. So I would definitely throw this inside of a case. Although, another thing you should know, I have not seen any actual third-party cases for this phone yet. The phone that you get inside the box is the one you're probably gonna rock for a while. So you should just know that you can't buy a case right now. But yeah, those are all some of the small things that I learned while using this phone for about a month now. Now, the question is, should you buy this phone? Well, of course, the answer is gonna be, it depends on what your needs are. But this is a really well-made phone with some pretty great software and features like an IR blaster and a headphone jack that you're not gonna find on any other phone. It's also got a flagship level display at about half the price of a normal flagship. The only people I wouldn't recommend this for is for people who really care about the camera quality, which is just mediocre on this phone. Like, if you really care about camera and don't want to spend too much, definitely buy the Pixel 3a instead. But yeah, for those people and for people who care about software updates, don't buy this phone. But otherwise, everybody else, you should maybe consider this one. But yeah, with that, that's pretty much it for this video. Like this if you liked it, subscribe if you guys loved it, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Bye.